Tim, the subtitle of your book seems rather ambitious. The Story of the World in the Life of Jesus. Tell us what you hope to accomplish when you wrote that.
Well, it's referring to the fact that the Bible is the story of the world. The story has several chapters: creation, then fall, then redemption, first through Israel, then through the church and Jesus, and finally the restoration of all things. And so the world has a story that's laid out in the Bible, and Jesus is the climax of that story. In fact, you can see it all in him. He's the creator. He's redeeming us from the fall. He's the one who's going to come again and judge the world and restore all things. And therefore, in Jesus, you have the climax of the world story, which is essentially what I meant by that is the plot narrative of the Bible.
Now, you chose the Gospel of Mark to provide these insights into the life of Christ. One of your observations about Mark that caught my attention naturally was that he was a good reporter. Is that why you chose his account?
Yes, it's real clear that Mark was not giving us as much of Jesus' teaching. He gives us more of his action, and he gives it to us in a very vivid eyewitness kind of account way. And therefore, when you see Jesus dealing with this person, that person, and that person, you're actually getting Jesus' behavior and seeing more of who he is. And I think the book of Mark actually gives you more of Jesus per chapter, more of Jesus per page, and less of Jesus' teaching and more of the person. And that's one of the reasons why I've always liked taking people to Mark first.
What are we missing, in your opinion, Tim, with regards to following Jesus? In particular, I'm asking that question in the context of the hard sayings of Jesus. We look at those and we say, wow, I don't know if I'm really following him.
The good thing, the message of grace is your foundation. If you felt like God accepts me because I'm following him with all my heart, you would be in absolute despair. Because you can, just like you said, when it says you should hate your mother and father and follow me, which is his way of saying, I should be more important than family, I should be more important than everything. You look at that and you say, oh, my heart isn't right. And it's never perfect. We're saved by grace, not by our works. Once you have that as a foundation, then you say, because of this grace, I've really got to work more and more on my commitment. So Mark puts a lot of pressure on us to constantly be honing that commitment and purifying that commitment and strengthening that commitment. But in the end, it's not the level of our commitment that saves us, but Jesus' grace.
Tim, the death of Jesus, of course, is one of the essential elements of the gospel message, but why does he have to die in order to grant forgiveness to his people?
Because God is this is the simplest answer, because God is a just God. He can't just shrug at sin. He can't just say, oh, well, boys will be boys. Because God is a loving God, he can't just let us perish under the punishment. So as a both just and loving God, he comes himself, bears the punishment, pays the debt himself. That's why the death of Jesus is not just an example of God's love. It's an accomplishment of our salvation, and it had to happen if we're going to be saved.
You've made it your life, Tim, to study Jesus, to preach his gospel, and to inspire folks to follow him. Is there any insight that you gained into Jesus' life that has most changed your life?
What's really important is not just that you believe in Jesus, but that you love Jesus. You know, and Paul at one point says, he talks about, he says we should be loving Christ. It's not enough just to believe in him in some general way. Loving Christ is what actually changes you. Being in love with Christ is what changes you bit by bit by bit. Paul talks about it a little bit when he says we're gazing at his glory and we're being transformed into his likeness. So I would say that's the main thing I've learned, is that it's reading the Gospels carefully and prayerfully and falling in love with Jesus as you do it is probably the most important single thing a Christian can do for his or her own spiritual growth.
Well, if you're interested in obtaining a copy of this book, we've provided a link through our website, cbnnews.com. Again, the title is King's Cross, the story of the world in the life of Jesus. The author, Dr. Timothy Keller, has been our guest. And Tim, thank you so much for talking to us. Thank you for your ministry in the gospel and in the city of New York.
Thank you, Lee.